Tonight, federal agents have exposed a money laundering empire connecting Minnesota fraud to Venezuelan cartels. Billions in stolen assets recovered.
3:47 a.m., Wayzata, Minnesota, was wrapped in January frost. Snow blanketed the lakefront estates. Nothing in the pre-dawn silence suggested danger, but federal agents had been planning this moment for 14 months. ICE, DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals. Over 180 agents converging on a single address overlooking Lake Minnetonka, a 12,000-square-foot estate listed under a shell corporation registered in Delaware. The property belonged to Hassan Yusuf Ahmed, a 49-year-old Somali businessman, community leader, philanthropist, and according to federal prosecutors, a critical node in a money laundering network connecting Minneapolis fraud schemes to Venezuela's Maduro regime. What agents found inside would expose billions in stolen assets. If you want the full truth, hit like so this story reaches more people. The investigation began with a single wire transfer. August 2024, Treasury Department analysts flagged a transaction moving $4.7 million from a Minneapolis nonprofit to an offshore account in Panama. The nonprofit was called Community Care Alliance, a social services organization providing childcare assistance to low-income families. But the Panama account belonged to Petrocaribe Holdings, a Venezuelan state oil subsidiary sanctioned by the U.S. government since 2019. Federal analysts traced the money backward, through banks in Miami, shell corporations in Wyoming, cryptocurrency exchanges in Singapore. Every trail led to the same conclusion. Pandemic relief funds stolen in Minnesota were being laundered through international networks and funneled to sanctioned Venezuelan entities. The scale was staggering. $9.1 billion potentially stolen from 14 different state-run programs since 2018. Not millions, billions. The Feeding Our Future scandal had already exposed $250 million fraud. Federal prosecutors charged 70 individuals. Trials were scheduled through 2027, but investigators discovered something darker beneath the surface. The fraud wasn't just theft, it was infrastructure. Money stolen from American taxpayers, laundered through international channels, used to finance narco-trafficking operations coordinated between Somali networks and Venezuelan cartels. This wasn't welfare fraud. This was state-sponsored money laundering. Comment exposed if you're ready to see how deep this goes. Federal agents established a covert surveillance operation in July 2025, a command post in downtown Minneapolis. 16 analysts working round-the-clock shifts. They monitored bank accounts, tracked cryptocurrency wallets, intercepted encrypted communications. Hassan Yusuf Ahmed appeared in 127 separate financial transactions. Wire transfers totaling $81.3 million over 18 months. Money moving through his businesses like water through pipes. He owned import-export companies, money service businesses, real estate holdings across Minnesota, Florida, and Texas. On paper, everything looked legitimate. Tax returns filed, business licenses current, community donations publicized. But federal wiretaps told a different story. In one recorded conversation from September 2025, Ahmed discussed Venezuelan roots and Caracas clearances. He referenced oil payments and diplomatic protection. Analysts cross-referenced those calls with Treasury sanctions databases. The connections emerged like spiderweb. Ahmed had been communicating with individuals identified by DEA as intermediaries for Cartel de los Soles, the Venezuelan military cartel operating under Maduro's protection. The cartel controlled cocaine trafficking routes through Venezuela, Colombia, and Mexico. Billions in annual revenue, protected by Venezuelan state apparatus. And according to federal evidence, Minnesota fraud money was being exchanged for Venezuelan oil profits laundered back into the U.S. through sophisticated cryptocurrency channels. The marriage of welfare fraud and narco-trafficking. If this shocks you, hit like now. The order came at 3:22 a.m. on January 6, 2026. Execute warrants simultaneously across 14 locations: Minnesota, Florida, Texas, California. Ahmed's Wayzata estate was the primary target, but agents also hit properties in Adena, a warehouse in South Minneapolis, offices in Miami, and luxury condos in Houston. Zero media notification, total operational silence. At 3:47 a.m., armored vehicles rolled up Ahmed's driveway. Agents moved through the darkness. Tactical gear, night vision, K-9 units. The battering ram struck the reinforced front door at 3:49 a.m. Wood splintered, glass shattered, alarms screamed. Ahmed was in the kitchen when agents entered, calm, almost expecting them. His hands went up without resistance. "I want my lawyer," were his only words. His wife and 3 children were escorted to a separate room. No charges against family members, but federal agents needed to secure the property. What they found inside turned the investigation into a national scandal. The estate's lower level had been converted into something resembling a bank vault. reinforced walls, biometric locks, climate-controlled storage. Inside, $47.2 million in cash, stacked in vacuum-sealed bundles, denominations ranging from $20 to $100 bills. Federal agents counted for 6 hours, but cash was just the beginning. Type yes to see what else agents discovered. The vault contained documents spanning 3 years, ledgers written in coded language, MN relief for Minnesota programs, VC for Venezuelan clearance, PO for petroleum operations, bank statements from 31 different accounts, offshore holdings in Panama, Cayman Islands, Belize, UAE, cryptocurrency wallet access codes, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Monero, balances totaling $127.4 million across digital platforms, and physical evidence linking Ahmed directly to Venezuelan officials, a Venezuelan diplomatic passport issued to Ahmed in 2023, despite never holding Venezuelan citizenship. Photographs showing Ahmed meeting with individuals later identified as Cartel de los Soles operatives. Locations included Caracas, Panama City, and Miami. Encrypted phones, 4 Samsung devices configured with military-grade security software. Messages between Ahmed and contacts saved under code names. Caracas 1, Florida Link, Pipeline. One message from November 2025 read, shipment confirmed, 12 millimeters cleared through MN routes. Petroleum exchange finalized Friday. Federal forensic analysts worked for days to decrypt the phones. What they uncovered was a system operating for years under federal radar. Minnesota fraud organizations would steal money from pandemic relief programs, child care assistance, housing vouchers, medical services for vulnerable populations. That money moved through Ahmed's money service businesses. Small transactions to avoid federal reporting threshold, aggregated into larger sums, then wired to offshore accounts controlled by shell corporations. The shell corporations would purchase Venezuelan oil through black market channels, oil sanctioned by the U.S. government, oil that shouldn't be tradable. But Maduro regime officials provided diplomatic cover, fake documentation, false certifications. The oil was then resold to legitimate buyers at discounted rates. The profits laundered back through cryptocurrency, returned to U.S. accounts appearing clean. A perfect cycle: theft, laundering, petroleum, crypto, return, billions moving through the system annually. Share this so more people understand the scale. Simultaneously, federal agents raided Ahmed's warehouse on East Lake Street in Minneapolis. The building was registered as a logistics facility for his import-export business. But inside, agents found something else entirely: evidence of a parallel trafficking operation. Shipping manifests showing containers moving through Houston, Miami, and Newark ports. Listed cargo, agricultural equipment, textiles, electronics. But federal interdiction records told a different story. 3 containers linked to Ahmed's business had been flagged at Port of Houston in 2024. Inspections revealed 247 kilograms of cocaine hidden in machinery compartments. The drugs were seized, but the investigation stalled. No arrests made at the time. Now, federal agents understood why. Documents in the warehouse showed payments to port officials, customs inspectors, logistics coordinators, each receiving between $25,000 and $100,000 per shipment that cleared without inspection. This wasn't random smuggling. This was systematic corruption enabling narco-trafficking through American ports. The Minnesota warehouse also contained financial records showing payments to individuals in Texas and Florida, all Somali Americans, all involved in money service businesses similar to Ahmed's operations. Federal prosecutors would later describe it as the most sophisticated money laundering network ever documented, connecting U.S. welfare fraud to international narco-trafficking. The network spanned at least 8 states, connected over 200 individuals, moved an estimated $3.2 billion through the system between 2022 and 2025. And at the center, Hassan Yusuf Ahmed, the man federal prosecutors now called the Minneapolis Connection. Comment your reaction to what you're seeing. As federal agents executed warrants across multiple states, Minneapolis erupted in protests. Cedar Riverside, the heart of Minnesota's Somali community. Over 1,200 people gathered outside the Brian Coyle Center by 8:00 a.m. Community leaders condemned the raid, called them racist targeting, demanded transparency. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar released a statement. Federal overreach cannot be justified by isolated incidents of fraud. The Somali community is not a criminal enterprise, but federal prosecutors pushed back with evidence. At a press conference on January 7, 2026, U.S. Attorney Andrew Lugar presented findings, charts showing money flows, photographs of evidence, timelines spanning years. This investigation is about following money stolen from American taxpayers, Lugar stated. It led us to Venezuelan cartels, to sanctioned oil operations, to systematic corruption of federal programs designed to help vulnerable populations. He confirmed 47 arrests across 8 states, assets seized totaling $1.73 billion, including cash, properties, vehicles, cryptocurrency, and frozen accounts. The numbers silenced some critics, but tensions remained high. On January 8th, during a separate ICE enforcement operation in Minneapolis, an agent fatally shot Renee Good, a 37-year-old woman, during an immigration raid. The shooting sparked immediate outrage. Protests intensified. Federal agents faced confrontations across the city. The situation spiraled into a national flashpoint. Immigration enforcement, fraud investigations, community trust, all colliding simultaneously. The complexity defied simple narratives. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Federal investigators traced the Venezuelan connection to its source: emails between Ahmed and individuals identified as Maduro regime operatives. One contact, Colonel Rafael Bastardo, a Venezuelan military officer sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury in 2020 for narco-trafficking activities. Messages showed Bastardo coordinating oil shipment, providing diplomatic documents, ensuring safe passage for financial transactions through Venezuelan channels. Another contact, Nestor Reverol, former Venezuelan interior minister, indicted by U.S. prosecutors in 2016 for cocaine trafficking. Reverol appeared in photographs with Ahmed, meetings in Panama City, 2023. Federal analysts confirmed Reverol facilitated banking relationships, allowing Ahmed's money to move through Latin American financial networks. The Venezuelan government denied all allegations, called the charges American imperialism, claimed fabricated evidence. But on January 3, 2026, U.S. military forces entered Venezuela and captured Nicolas Maduro himself. Maduro was brought to the United States, arraigned in federal court, charged with narco-terrorism conspiracy, conspiracy to import cocaine, weapons charges. Federal prosecutors described Maduro as the head of Cartel de los Soles, operating a narco-state using Venezuelan military and government apparatus to traffic cocaine and launder billions. The timing wasn't coincidental. Maduro's capture and Ahmed's arrest were coordinated operations, part of a larger strategy to dismantle networks connecting U.S. fraud schemes to Venezuelan narco-trafficking. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced $700 million in Maduro-linked assets had been seized: jets, mansions in Florida and Dominican Republic, bank accounts, jewelry. But federal officials acknowledged that represented only a fraction of total stolen wealth. Estimates suggested Maduro regime operations moved over $15 billion through international networks between 2018 and 2025, and Ahmed's Minneapolis operation contributed at least $3.2 billion to that total. If you believe justice matters, comment justice below. The raids revealed the human cost hidden beneath financial statistics: $9.1 billion stolen from Minnesota programs. Money meant to feed children, house families, provide medical care to vulnerable populations. Instead, that money financed narco-trafficking, enabled corruption, enriched criminals while communities suffered. Federal prosecutors presented victim impact statements. Families denied childcare assistance because funds ran out. Medical providers unpaid for services rendered to patients. Housing programs shuttered due to budget shortfalls. One Minnesota mother testified her childcare assistance was terminated in August 2024. She lost her job because she couldn't afford care for her 2 children, fell behind on rent, faced eviction. Meanwhile, Hassan Ahmed was moving millions through offshore accounts to purchase Venezuelan oil. The betrayal cut deep. Ahmed had been a respected community leader, donated to mosques, funded youth programs, advocated for immigrant rights. Federal prosecutors revealed those donations came from stolen money, philanthropy as money laundering, community investment as cover for criminal enterprise. The trust-fractured communities relied on evaporated. When respected leaders betray public trust, how do communities recover? When systems designed to protect instead enable exploitation, who remains accountable? Federal officials promised systemic reforms: enhanced oversight for state-run programs, stricter monitoring of money service businesses, improved coordination between Treasury, FBI, and state agencies. But reforms move slowly, and criminals adapt quickly. Share this video before the story disappears. Ahmed's trial is scheduled for June 2026. He faces charges including money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the United States, narco-trafficking conspiracy, and sanctions violations. Federal prosecutors are seeking life imprisonment plus forfeiture of all seized assets. His defense attorneys argue entrapment, claim federal agents manufactured evidence, insist Ahmed is being scapegoated to justify aggressive enforcement against Somali communities. The legal battle will determine not just Ahmed's fate, but set precedents for how federal authorities prosecute complex international money laundering schemes. Meanwhile, the broader investigation continues. Federal agents have identified 143 additional suspects. Expect 60 more arrests within 3 months. Anticipate asset seizures exceeding $2 billion. The Minneapolis operation was a hub, but federal officials believe similar networks operate in other cities: Seattle, Columbus, San Diego. cities with large immigrant populations and state-run assistance programs vulnerable to fraud. Treasury Department announced enhanced scrutiny of money service businesses nationwide. New reporting requirement, increased audits, penalties for compliance failures. The crackdown sends shockwaves through legitimate businesses. Many money service providers serve immigrant communities with limited banking access. Enhanced regulations may reduce services for vulnerable populations. The balance between enforcement and access remains delicate. Maduro's capture added geopolitical dimensions. Venezuelan government collapsed following his removal. Opposition leaders assumed interim control, but stability remains uncertain. The U.S. justified military action citing narco-terrorism. Drug trafficking as national security threat justifying extraordinary measures. Critics questioned legality, argued sovereignty violations, warned of precedents enabling future interventions. The debate will shape foreign policy for years. Hit like if accountability matters to you. Federal officials estimate recovering $1.73 billion represents approximately 20% of total stolen wealth. The remaining 80% remains hidden. Offshore accounts in jurisdictions uncooperative with U.S. law enforcement. Cryptocurrency wallets with untraceable transactions. Assets held under names not yet identified. Recovering stolen money takes years. International cooperation. Legal battles across multiple countries. Many victims will never see restitution. Minnesota's state programs face funding crises. Billions stolen created budget shortfalls. Services reduced. Waiting lists lengthened. Vulnerable populations suffer consequences of fraud committed by others. Federal emergency funding may help, but political battles over appropriations delay relief. Communities bear the cost while criminals enjoy stolen wealth. The children who didn't receive meals because funding disappeared. The families denied housing assistance while money flowed offshore. The medical patients whose providers closed due to unpaid invoices. They are the true victims, and their losses can't be measured in dollars alone. Federal agents continue following leads. Financial trails extend into Europe, Asia, Middle East. Money laundering networks operate globally. What happened in Minneapolis represents one node in a vast system. Dismantling that system requires international cooperation. Enhanced intelligence sharing, political will to prioritize white-collar crime enforcement, but resources remain limited. Priorities shift, public attention fades. Comment accountability if you're still paying attention. Ahmed's Wayzata estate remains sealed by federal marshals, a symbol of stolen wealth displayed as luxury overlooking Minnesota's pristine lake. Inside that estate, $47.2 million in cash. Cryptocurrency wallets worth $127.4 million. Evidence of systematic corruption spanning years. Outside, a community grappling with betrayal. Trust shattered. Institutions questioned. Enforcement criticized. The complexity resists simple solutions. Yes, fraud occurred. Yes, money was stolen. Yes, connections to narco-trafficking were real. But enforcement also swept up innocent people, created fear in vulnerable communities. Raised questions about proportionality and targeting. How do societies balance justice and compassion, enforcement and humanity, accountability and understanding? Those questions don't have easy answers. What remains clear? Systems failed. Oversight was inadequate. Criminals exploited vulnerabilities for years, while authorities failed to detect patterns until billions disappeared. The Minnesota scandal exposed those failures, forced accountability, demanded reforms. Whether those reforms actually materialize remains uncertain. Whether systems improve or simply adapt to avoid scrutiny depends on sustained attention and political will. And that depends on people like you refusing to look away. Subscribe to this channel for continued coverage. Share this story so others understand what happened. Comment your thoughts below. Hassan Ahmed sits in federal detention awaiting trial. His assets frozen, his reputation destroyed, his future uncertain. The 143 additional suspects identified by federal investigators continue their lives, some aware they're under surveillance, others oblivious to coming arrests. The money still hidden offshore represents billions in stolen wealth. American taxpayer money, pandemic relief funds, assistance meant for vulnerable populations, criminals enjoying luxury while communities suffer. Federal agents work to trace remaining assets, but the task is enormous. The network's sophisticated, the jurisdictions uncooperative, justice moves slowly, criminals adapt quickly. The fight continues, but it requires awareness, demand for accountability, refusal to accept corruption as inevitable. Your engagement matters. Every like signals algorithms to spread this story. Every comment shows people care. Every share reaches someone who needs to know. So hit like right now, comment justice. If you believe accountability matters, share this widely. Because this isn't just about Minneapolis. It's about systems vulnerable to exploitation everywhere. It's about criminals who believe they're above consequences, officials who fail in oversight responsibilities, communities left to suffer the fallout. The Venezuelan connection made headline. Maduro's capture dominated news cycles. But the deeper story remains: how welfare fraud schemes connect to international narco-trafficking, how money stolen in America finances cartels abroad, how corruption spans borders and institutions. That story deserves attention, demands accountability, requires action. Share this video now so the truth reaches more people. Hit subscribe so you don't miss updates. Comment what you think should happen next, because $9.1 billion was stolen, $1.73 billion recovered, $7.4 billion remains hidden, 143 suspects identified, 47 arrested, 96 still free. The math is brutal. The fight continues. The outcome depends on sustained pressure and public awareness. This is only the beginning. The investigations expand globally. The networks run deeper than initially believed. The corruption touches more institutions than authorities expected. More arrests coming, more assets to seize, more stories to expose. Stay vigilant, stay informed, stay engaged, because justice requires witnesses. Accountability demands attention. Change needs pressure, and that starts with you refusing to scroll past, choosing to engage. Deciding this matters. Hit like if justice is worth fighting for. Comment your reaction below. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Share this story before it's buried. The truth about Minneapolis, the Venezuelan connection, the billions stolen, the networks exposed. This is the story they don't want trending. Make it trend anyway.